Okay, now, yeah, we're on.
Okay.
There's you. Well, let's give it a try.
Start quick.
Huh?
Start quick.
Okay. This is Ken Borelli, and I'm with the Italian American Heritage Foundation, and I'm with Mary Klevan.
Klevan, yes.
And you're
Mary Canepa Klevan.
okay, Mary Canepa.
Canepa, I'm a Canepa. Yeah.
Canepa, yeah. And of course, I know your niece. Is it she your niece?
Who,
Louise. Louise, yes.
She's my cousin.
Oh, she's your cousin.
She's
Okay,
my cousin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I helped her with producing
The
Monterey Opera.
And my son helped her too.
Yes.
He's a musician.
We did the serenade. Now what happened? Oh,
That's me.
oh don't scare me.
He taught at Robert Louis Stevenson School. He was their music director there.
Yeah, and he also helped me with Louise's piece, Old Monterey.
Yes.
Did you see it?
No, I
You heard it?
I haven't seen it. I don't know why I didn't see it, but because she showed it to somebody down there. Well, she must have showed it to my son.
Oh yeah, well, he did it.
He did it.
Oh,
So
we have
anyway,
it's really a nice nice
Nice
piece.
piece,
It's
huh?
about 7-8 minutes long.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Yeah, yeah.
And but now Rob, he's retired now, of course.
Uh-huh.
But what he does, what he did for years, he also helps with the Monterey Jazz Festival.
Yes.
And that's on this week, I think.
Oh, so yeah, he's busy.
So busy.
He's really busy.
Yeah.
But why we're here today is because somebody interviewed me, and I showed him. A. Here you go.
Okay.
I showed them a picture of my uncle's boat because he was under house arrest. He was a fisherman in San Francisco. Then when the war came, he couldn't go to sea.
That's right.
I mean, he was stuck.
That's right.
And so on his pastime, he carved a picture of his boat. So this lady talked to me about it.
Oh,
And she came and I showed her the picture, which she was more organized than I am. But the bottom line was that I was talking to Louise. We talk about once a month,
okay.
a couple of times a month. And she told me about you. She said you ended up in Stockton because of that.
Well, no, not really.
Uh-huh.
The reason I ended up in Stockton was because my husband, who was from New York City, he was a GI, he was, and I met him in Monterey. Then he left and he went to Alaska, but he liked Monterey so much, he came back.
Oh, okay.
He came back to Monterey. He didn't want to go back to New York. He had to go back there to get his papers so that he would be out of the army. But he found out about the University of, he tried to get into Stanford, couldn't get into Stanford. He wanted to get a college credit. He wanted a college degree. So what he did is he went to, he couldn't get into Stanford, and he didn't want to go down to UCLA, but he found out about this University of Pacific.
Yeah.
So he got in there. So he did. He came, and he would come. He came to the university, lived here for a while, but he kept coming down to Monterey on weekends, and we finally got married, and then I had two children. I was married the first time to a GI too, but that didn't work out. It was war years, and it was one of those very,
Well,
very
Louise
sad.
said, and I can't figure it, I guess it was your father who had to stop fishing because he was,
Yeah, when I lived with my parents, I came up and I lived with my parents. And when the war broke out with Japan, I was still living with my parents. And so Stan, he lived with us for a while he was going to the university. On weekends he'd come down once in a while. And then anyway, after we got married, luckily he graduated from the University of Pacific, and he got a job with the Stockton Record right away.
oh, the paper.
The paper here in Stockton, and that's why we came to Stockton. He had planned on working for the Monterey Herald. They were not hiring anybody. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I lived with my parents, and of course, I came from Italy. I was 3 months old, and I came to Italy, and at that time, I wasn't a citizen. Even though I graduated from high school, I passed my constitution. I had to go to night school and go to night school to study the Constitution, and then I finally got my. They gave me my first papers, but I had to wait till I was 21 before they gave me my second papers. So I was not a citizen, I guess.
You were a lawful permanent resident.
Yeah.
Now, was your father and mother, they weren't
They lived here, and all those years, they never got their citizenship papers.
So during the war, they had to leave?
So they had to leave, and my dad, and I was living with him, with my oldest daughter. She was a baby, and my dad says, because they told everybody, non-citizens, Italians and Germans all have to leave the Monterey area.
Well, where'd they go?
They had to be away from the ocean, from the water. Stupid how they did this. So, okay, they left. So they found a place. Louise's mom. Now Louise's mom was born and raised in Monterey. She was a citizen, but her father wasn't. That was my dad's brother.
Yes.
And they fished together. They had a boat, and they went fishing. My dad and my uncle Theodore, and then there was another uncle, my uncle Leonard, and the three of them. That's how they made their living. Plus, there was they had a half brother in Monterey who had a fish market on the wharf. So, but anyway, when they told everybody that the Italians and the Germans all had to leave and go somewhere else, most of the people that lived on my street, on Lane Street, they had family in Pittsburgh,
Oh.
Pittsburgh, Martinez, and all that, and that was the way they went there. We didn't have any relatives. We had relatives in Watsonville, and we had relatives in San Francisco. So my Uncle Leo did go to San Francisco, and he went to work for the shipyards, even though he wasn't a citizen. But they gave him a citizenship paper after the war because he worked in the shipyards. They just gave it to him.
Oh, and what about your father?
My father, they didn't give him anything. Every year they would, they had something at that time that you could live here
Okay.
all the time.
Did he during the war? Did they move to Watsonville or Salinas?
No, what they did is Louise's mom found this place up on Seaside. You know where Fort Ord is?
Yes.
Okay. Way up on those hills, they found a place there. Now, she found a place for them that was pretty nice, but they moved. But for my dad and my mom and my grandmother, who was living, and me, because they said I guess my dad says you're going to have to leave too. So anyway,
God.
there was a place that was being built. It was just the four walls. It had the outhouse, and it had a pump outside, and that's how we lived there. At least it had a roof,
Yeah.
and so we lived there, and I lived there with him. I went to Santa Barbara. My dad says, why don't you go down and live with Uncle Joseph? That's his uncle. My great uncle was my grandmother's brother. Says, why don't go down there? Think. So he called Uncle Joseph. He says, yeah, she can come here, because my husband at that time was stationed at Hoff General Hospital in Santa Barbara. So I went down there with my sister Claudia and my little baby, and we lived there for, maybe a month. And then my Uncle Joseph says, you can't live here anymore. So I called my mom and dad. My mom says, come home. And that's why I went back home and lived with them.
What happened to the boat?
The boat, well, what happened to their boats? They couldn't go out fishing. The boats were, I guess they anchored them on the wharf, and that's where it stood for all. Now I couldn't remember how many years.
Did they ever go back to sea after the war?
After even before the war ended in Japan, for some reason or other, they realized.
Well, in 1943, Italy surrendered, so they weren't enemy aliens anymore.
I think that's probably
Yeah.
that's probably what it was.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was.
What a turmoil!
It was really. When I stop to think of it, sometimes I think, how in the world did I live? How did we live through those days? Because anyway, I lived up there with them for quite a while. But what happened? One day, my daughter was sick, got sick, and we called the doctor. He says, "Well, I can't come in." So I got her, I got a friend, and he had a car, and he came up there and got me and took me to the house in Monterey, because we had just bought that house from a German couple.
Oh my God! What did they have to leave too?
Well, they had to leave. Oh yes.
They had to leave too.
Yep. He was a builder. He built homes. So the house that we bought from him was too big. It was a 3-story house. So he built himself a house in Pacific Grove. But he had to leave. He had to leave that.
You mentioned that a lot of people in your neighborhood had to leave.
Yeah, because most of them were non-citizens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And they were fishermen primarily.
And most of the men of the household were fishermen.
Well, I don't know if you know that if they moved to Pittsburgh, they would have had to move again because all of the Italians in Pittsburgh had to move because they were all fishermen too.
That's what
And they're all related.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
We heard that afterwards.
Yeah.
They all moved to Pittsburgh because I kept telling my dad, well, why don't we move to, with them? We'll find a place in Pittsburgh.
No.
He says no. He says I'm not. He says my boat is here. I'm gonna stay here where my boat is.
That's why Louise, she wrote her music, and she mentioned the boats.
Yes.
I forgot what they were called. What was the name of the boat?
Well, wasn't it the Monterey?
Was it the Monterey?
I think it was the Monterey. I think Craig has a picture. See if there's a picture on the wall of the of the boat.
Well, we'll take a picture later of the boat.
But anyway, so like I said, Ken, it was a sad time of my life, really, because of all these things, because of the marriage and my first husband not caring and everything, and
Well, how many people lived in the home? You was your mother, your father,
in the big house.
the house that you had to move to out in the mountains.
Just because remember, I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and they were all living home, and some of them were still young. They were still going to school, and so what they did is my older brother, the one that follows me, he was old enough to stay there. And then my sister Mal, my sister Claudia and Augie. But my 2 younger brothers, Louis and Dominic, they came up there with us.
They stayed with you? Were they born here or were they born in Italy?
They were all born here.
Oh, so they were U.S. citizens.
They were all U.S. citizens.
That really didn't make very much sense because you had some family members that could stay at the house and the other. This is chaos.
And that's the way it was with Louise's parents.
Louise talked about that. She said that
they had to leave. They had to leave because her dad, my uncle Theodore, he was not a citizen, and so they had to leave. But luckily, she was a citizen, and she spoke English. My dad and my mom, at the end they spoke broken English, but they never did. My mom tried to get her citizenship papers, but like my dad says, because they said you can go to school. They had night schools for citizenship. The only thing is that my dad, he worked, and they usually, he slept until 2 o'clock. Then at 2 o'clock they'd go down to the wharf or down to the beach where the rowboat is, and row to their boat, which is anchored out there on the bay, not too far, but anyway. And then they'd fish, and he wouldn't get home a lot of times till maybe 11, 12, or 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day. And so then he had to sleep. So
well, it kind of reminds me because my grandmother was in the same situation, and they asked her to get her citizenship. But I have to say it was hard because my grandmother never knew how to read and write. So how was she good? She didn't know how to read and write.
Oh, now see, my mom and dad, my dad didn't know how to read and write because they both had gone to school in Italy.
Oh no! My grandmother came in 1900, so 1910. They didn't have much school.
In fact, my mother, towards the end, she sort of learned how to read English.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it, you know, she got to where she could read, and she would speak. She still spoke broken English,
Well,
but
how's your Italian?
I'm Genovese. You know, so that's what I speak. I mean, I speak. I can't really speak the true Italian language.
Well, no, it's pretty close.
Yeah, but we spoke Genovese.
Oh, okay. But you don't have family back there now, do you? You have a cousin, I think.
I had my grandmother, my mother's, most of them were from my mother's side, and then so now I do have a cousin, and she has children. What's her name?
Augusta is your cousin.
Augusta and
Daniela.
Daniela, yeah.
Okay, okay. Do you keep in touch? Christmas cards or nothing?
Well,
Oh, good.
now, well, I used to. I used to write to them in English because Daniela could read.
Oh, okay.
You know, but I have them. My mom. Every time my mom would say, "I'd like to go," maybe I'd like to see my mother. That's when her mother was still alive, and father. And my dad says, "You can't go." He was afraid if she went, if he sent her, she wouldn't come back. My dad never wanted to go back to Italy.
What, was she Genovese too? Oh, she wanted. Where were they? Where did they grow up in Genoa? I mean, Liguria. Do you know? Because the village.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it right now. God, I gave all that information to my daughter Lenny.
Oh, well, that's all right.
Yeah.
Well, Nani was from Arzeno.
Arsenio.
Where?
In the hills.
Arsenio.
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 Okay.
In the
Well, you
mountains.
know, we have members, and I had a friend of mine. She's there now, in Liguria.
Oh,
She's
Liguria.
visiting her family in Liguria.
Now-
Had I known all of this, I could have gotten her information. But well, we're doing the best we can.
Can.
And Nanu was from Riva.
Riva.
Trigosa.
He was from Riva. My dad was from Riva Trigosa.
Oh, okay. I'll write that down
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, he was from Riva Trigosa, and see, a couple of years ago I could remember, but now I'm 102. I'm losing it.
I don't think so. I couldn't remember it.
Oh my God! But anyway, that's
Well, you know, Louise and I started talking about this, and she said that you also had, she was talking about herself, and then she talked about you and how everybody, I mean, one moment you were in a neighborhood with a lot of family. All of a sudden, I guess war was declared, and I don't know what happened. Did they send notes, or how did they let you know?
they do no. Well, all I remember when the war started here with Japan, because when Italy and Germany and all them were they were having a war there. We really didn't, we were kids. We really
You didn't care. I mean, not care. You just it wasn't part of it.
We did, and my mom and dad didn't even. All they worried about was, that he would get some fish, so he could get some money, so he could buy flour and stuff like that, to
To
make
live.
bread, to live.
Yeah, to live.
And
To live.
and pay the rent because before that, before we moved into this house, we rented a house right next door to it, and we lived there together with Louise's parents when we first came to Monterey from Italy. The three families all lived together in this one house. Louise's mother and father, and I remember, now I'm the oldest of all the kids, and me, and my grandmother, and my Uncle Leo, and my other Aunt Maria. She lived there with us for a while till she got married. She married Acosta, and so we just lived there. But then, when the people next door came and asked us if they wanted to sell their house, and if we would like to buy it for, I mean, you should have seen how cheap it was.
I bet it was what, $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000.
Yeah, that's all it was.
Can you imagine?
I think it was $3,000.
Is the house still there?
Oh yeah,
Now it's worth what, $2 million?
well no,
That probably is.
we sold it. We sold it after my brother died. My brother Dominic died, and my brother Louis, he says he didn't want to hang on to it, and I couldn't afford to pay the taxes there. You know what the taxes are? Every year, your
Maybe now,
your
well, you
house
were under
taxes-
Prop 13, so you were paying hard.
Well, I was, but if I bought that, I don't know if I would have gotten that. But even so, I would never, because my brother Dominic, at the end, was paying $7,000 a year in taxes. And
That's a lot.
That's a lot of money.
Was that
It's
before
a
Prop
big,
13?
he didn't have Prop 13. My sister Mal, after my mother died, my sister Mal was, the estate sort of went to her. It actually went to the seven of us, the seven of us, but she was in charge. And you know, she had Prop 13, and as long as she lived, the taxes were
Reasonable,
good.
yeah.
But when she died, my brother didn't get them, and I wouldn't have got them either.
Well, you know, when your father was a fisherman, they really never got rich on fishing.
Not
Just
my dad did.
just like my uncle. They barely made a living.
Barely.
And now fish is popular. It's very trendy.
Yeah.
And fresh fish is expensive. In those days,
You know, I was telling them I went to buy some, the last time that I shopped, I went to buy some rock cod. That's what my father and them fished for, rock cod, because they weren't sardine fishermen. They went for rock cod, the fish that you eat, rock cod, halibut, and
out in Monterey.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Monterey. They would go down the coast, down to Big Sur, and they would, in their little boat, they'd travel up the coast wherever they could. You know, San Pedro, they'd go down there and fish, and San Pedro lived there for a month or so and fish because the fishermen would keep in touch with each other. Hey, these are biting, now come on down.
Oh my gosh.
And so my dad did that for quite a while, but then he got sick and he couldn't do a lot of those things. It's a good thing that by that time.
That was probably in the 50s or 60s.
We were old enough to
Yeah.
I babysat and brought some money in, and my brother worked for the Postal Telegraph. Remember the Postal Telegraph?
No, I don't know what that
The
is.
Postal Telegraph was like Western Union.
Oh,
So we
okay.
had the Postal Telegraph and Western Union. And he
Okay.
was the delivery, and they used to, when you know, years ago, when you got notes from Western Union, they didn't call you up. They would, they had the delivery guys. They'd come and bring you the notice from the office.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't.
And so all the kids, you know, that you know, who had the ones that were rich enough to have a bike, they would get on their bike, they'd go down there and they'd give them a little job, and they would give them a little bit
Oh,
of
I
money.
like delivery boys.
They were delivery
Yeah.
boys. So they delivered the Western Union and the Postal Telegraph. Then my brother, as the years went on, he became manager of the Postal Telegraph, and he made a little bit more money. And then Postal Telegraph, that was it.
Well, and then we got all of this now, including.
Yeah, we have it, all of this.
Yeah, but this stuff was a lot simpler to do the other.
Yeah, it was. It was just like I said. It was hard, but we struggled. But you know what, Ken? We were, as long as we were well, and we had a roof over our heads, and food on the table and all that. And my grandmother, my dad's mother, she liked to work in the yard. We grew a lot of our vegetables, our peas, our carrots, our onions, potatoes, things like that. And so we never starved. We never starved. And then fishermen, if my dad didn't go fishing and bring home fish, the fisherman says, "Here, Mr. Canepa," or John, they call him Giovanni. "Giovanni, come on, here. We got these, you bring it home, you eat them." They would share their food.
Oh my God. You know, it's kind of funny because I'm allergic to fish. I'd starve. I can't eat it. I can't eat it.
And you know what's funny? Because of my brothers, I liked fish. I've always liked fish.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, but my sister Claudia didn't like fish, and my sister Augie didn't like fish, and my two younger brothers. Do we have to have fish? And,
yes.
And my mom would say, "Well, today we're having fish. Tomorrow we're having minestrone, or tomorrow we're having pasta, spaghetti." She always made. She used to even make spaghetti without meat a lot of times.
Oh yeah, you mean the sauce.
It's a sauce, spaghetti sauce.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we always had spaghetti sauce. and
Did she
was
make
good.
it by hand? The
But-
pasta? Was
No,
it fresh
no,
or she bought
no.
the
She bought that.
Uh-huh.
There was a grocery store in Oak Grove, and I forgot his name, but they had this grocery store, and he had all this Italian stuff, had all kinds of pasta, and he would deliver it to the house.
Yeah, they did do a lot of delivery.
And when the war broke out, my dad wasn't working anymore. He says, "Mr. Giovanni," he says, "don't worry." He says, "I'll bring it to you."
What did your father do then when he couldn't fish?
He stayed home.
Well, that was like my uncle, but did they work in the yard? Did they do
Oh,
this?
yes, he did what he could.
But he couldn't get a job?
Well, even if what job was he going to get? All he knew what to do is fish. And besides, he wasn't a citizen. Nobody was going to hire him.
That was I
Yeah.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're
So-
doing pretty well now. You mentioned that your husband was in Alaska. And that intrigued me because my uncle was in Alaska. And I wonder, did they fight in the Aleutian Islands?
No, now my first husband,
The second
I
husband.
don't know where he went. My second husband,
Yeah.
he when he lived in New York. It was, and then he went. I don't know. He went down to Carolina or something. But then there was the draft or something. I guess they drafted him,
Yes.
and so they sent him to Fort Ord.
Yes.
Yeah, to Fort
Well, that's where
Ord.
my uncle was, in
Yeah,
Fort Ord.
Fort Ord. And so then when he was stationed there,
I think they shipped him
That-
to Alaska.
that's the first time I met him. That's where he was, and then, I went out with him a couple of times, and then that was it. And I didn't know him. And finally, a year or so later, here was this guy sitting at a bar, and I go up and I said, I went up. I says, "Hey, you stood me up." And he says, he looked at me. I said, "Yeah, that such and such." He says, "That was years ago." I remembered him. He finally remembered. But when he was the one that he went up to he did go up to the Aleutian Island. He didn't fight, but what they did up there, what he did, they used him. They were rewiring things that I guess they had. I don't know. All I know is that he says, I was climbing telephone poles all the time.
But he was in the Aleutian Islands. I think he must have been there
Yeah.
after my uncle. Because, see, this is another thing about this craziness of internments. Because my uncle was wounded. He was paralyzed for the rest of his life. He was fighting. He was in Fort Ord. He was fighting in the Aleutian Islands. And my grandmother was an not illegal, but she was an alien. And she had a hard time seeing him because she wasn't a citizen. Isn't this crazy? And so I guess after the war, after the battle, then your husband, they must have set up communication things.
Yeah, I think that's it.
That's but probably because they both were in Fort Ord.
Yeah. Well, so when he came, when he left the Aleutian Island, they sent him back to Fort Ord.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's
Well, my uncle never came back to Fort Ord. He was in an army hospital for most of the war.
Oh, boy.
But before that, in Fort Ord, my father and some family members went to visit my uncle in Fort Ord, and they brought this lady, a friend who also knew my uncle,
yeah.
and that was my mother. And they started their dating in Monterey.
Oh boy.
So you know what their favorite song was? It Happened in Monterey.
Oh,
Do you know that song?
I know that.
Huh?
Song. Yeah, I know that
Is
song.
that your song? No.
I got a job, and I had a lot of jobs. I worked in the babysat. I worked in I ushered in the theater, cashiered in the theater, worked in the bakery, worked in the cannery, and finally, I got this job with the telephone company, the Pacific Bell. Pacific Bell. It used to be Pacific Bell. Now it's AT&T.
Yes.
So I got a job
In Monterey or here?
in Monterey.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, so I got a job with them, and after I'd been there for about a year, they sent me to Fort Ord to work. So I would go out there at 5 o'clock and work till 10 o'clock at night or something.
So you drove?
No, I didn't drive.
Oh.
The company, the telephone company, sent us there by cab.
Oh, good.
And at that time, it wasn't 4 lanes. It was just two-lane road. And sometimes at night, in that thick fog, you couldn't see anything.
That's right. That's
It
right.
was dangerous. But I enjoyed working at Fort Ord. It was fun. I felt sorry for a lot of the kids because a lot of them they'd come to Fort Ord and they'd send them
To the
Europe or to the
war.
the islands.
Yeah, the islands.
Yeah.
That's like my uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a big operation. Got you here.
Okay.
That's a great photo. Any other comments about those good old days? What's your favorite food now?
My favorite food?
Yeah.
I still like Italian food.
Oh.
I still like pasta. I've always loved pasta.